Recording has started.
Thank you, Daryl. The first item on the agenda, I'm just going to remind everybody to sign in online. Daryl has put a link to the sign in the chat for everybody. So please make sure that you sign in so that we can log in here. Next item is the project update. I did see that Tracy Dillon joined. Tracy?
That was weird. Sorry, guys, I got dropped.
Are you still there, Tracy?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. I got dropped for a second. Are we ready for the tracker?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Sorry about that again. I don't know what. Must have got a short wire here. So just going down the list, we do have a few open items. I did send over the sheet on the metrics, so we'll go ahead and review that. I don't think Tim is on. I know you guys are still waiting for the West Lumen. As far as I know, you're still needing the West Lumen extension and agreement. And looking to see, like I said, I don't think I have Tim, but he did say he's working on that. We're going to talk about some of the defaults today. Again, let me glance at all the people. Carl, are you on by chance? Carl Klein? No. How about Sue Jansen?
Sue is here. I don't see Carl on here, but Sue is here.
Okay, so we definitely can cover that. I asked them to join because they were, Sue was a huge part in getting the ESInet rolled out, and we did supply some images that we can look at. Pitkin and Vale County, that one is still being worked on. Vicki continues to work with Andrew. This is one where we need the PSAP and Motorola and Lumen and Entrado all available at the same time, and scheduling has been incredibly difficult, but Vicki is still working on that. The Mo for Cheyenne Mountain, again, still waiting for that circuit to be installed. And then this one, I saw some emails flying back and forth, and Vicki and Andrew may have some additional information, but we have calls that should be going there from the Cheyenne Grand Junction route. The research that I was given looks like this is an issue primarily with T-Mobile. So we would need the customer working directly with the wireless carrier, unless Vicki or Andrew has heard anything else on that one. Andrew?
I have not.
Okay. Yeah, that was they're going into 911 net and being reported. But from the information both Entrado and Lumen has been able to find, it appears that these are within the T-Mobile network.
Okay, hang on just 1 second, Tracy. Jennifer raised her hand. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Tracy, I appreciate you looking into that, and I am happy to work with the carrier. However, do you have a good phone number or a person that I can connect with so that I don't spend a lot of time chasing down someone to work with in the first place?
I don't have a wireless carrier contact, but I can check with Entrado and see if there's anyone that they could recommend, or if Kim is on and knows that.
Well, and I got some phone numbers after our last ESInet meeting, and I will work with those as well, but it would be helpful if Entrado could at least provide someone to start with.
I'll follow up on that for you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Jennifer.
And Jennifer,
Tracy.
I think at one point last year, from the information I had seen from Vicki, they had information on a specific tower. I didn't know if you had that information or not. Some of the calls where ESInet tickets were open and it was all traced back, I believe related to a specific tower at the time. So if you don't have that, we may be able to provide you with that also.
Yeah, if you could forward that to me, that would be most helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So other than the Cheyenne Grand Junction, I haven't been aware of any other issues with other PSAPs since our last call. But I'll throw it out there and ask everyone on this call now because I don't always get copied on the emails.
So this is Daryl. I don't see her on the call, but I was contacted a week ago by Katie Haar and Durango La Plata.
Okay.
As far as I know, it was only one call, but they got a misroute from Casper, Wyoming. I provided her with Andrew's contact information to follow up on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and Carl was able to look at that and trace it back. I believe it was routing. It was a routing issue by the mobile carrier. I think that was Verizon, but that was a there was only one of those that we could find. So I'll check and see if there was any more information. But right now it seemed like a very odd one-off that we may be able to. But I'll check and see if there was any more info.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, is that it for the issue tracker update, Tracy?
Yes.
Okay, next would be the issues for migrated PSAPs that are not already covered. Misrouted wireless calls, Laramie County, Mesa County. Anything on that?
Which one was that?
It should be under, I don't know if you have that, there we go. B, issues for migrated PSAPs that are not already covered, misroute wireless, their minimum calls, Laramie and Mesa.
Yeah, so that's actually what we're going to cover in the drawing or the diagram I gave to you guys, Sue Jansen. And if Carl is on, we're going to talk about it. We kind of looked at all of the routing tickets, issues, questions that we've had over the last year. We did have a quick call with Kimberly to kind of talk about some of those. And we're going to kind of go over what we found in that research. And then if you can share that diagram, Sue can kind of walk through it and help everyone kind of re-educate themselves on how the routing is supposed to work. Yeah, that's it. So what we did is with the help of Intrado and our NOC and some of the technical resources at Lumen, we went into 911net and also into our NOC and kind of just pulled a full list of the reported routing issues for 2022 and kind of did some, Carl did a lot of research on them to find out like where the call came from, where it should have gone, where it actually went. And in all fairness, all of our research pointed to the majority of what is happening is going back to the wireless callers, the wireless carriers, sorry. And Intrado has been, as part of their process, they notify these wireless carriers that, hey, this number needs to be fixed or changed. And they do that multiple times. I don't remember, I think Kim can correct me, like up to 6 months, they keep continuing to reach out to the wireless carriers to get this updated. And after that, there just isn't a whole lot that Intrado and Lumen can do as far as making them change that number. And I think once Sue starts going through this, you can understand a little bit more about how we came to that conclusion.
Hi. As a 911 call originates at an end office, which could be an ILEC, a CLEC, an RBOC, a wireless VoIP scenario. They currently route 911 to what we call a selective router. The selective router has been in play for years and years and years, and it was not taken out of the configuration when the state went to the next gen ESInet. The only way to take us out of that scenario would be for every end office to put direct trunking to the ESInet. However, that being said, the originating person dials 911. That 911 call may hit one of 6 selective routers that are in Colorado, and each end office has a specific selective router it routes to. As you can see, that there's an incoming ES type trunk by that up towards near the first alley database, which I just realized it doesn't have BASE in it, but that end office sends a 911 call to one of the selective routers. The selective router does a database dip against the ANI or PANI that is seen on the call. If the ANI is found, we route the call to the ESInet, sending them 911, where they do another database dip and they route accordingly as to how it's built in their network. If the call from the OSP comes into the primary selective router without ANI or garbled ANI, there is what we call each end office has a default routing ESN assigned to it that's closest to their site. So you may have Denver Metro that has 7 or 8 different areas that they could hit a PSAP closest to them. We need to route it to that particular PSAP. So our office will send the ESInet a specific routing DN that says send it to Larimer, send it to Denver PD, send it to Elizabeth County PSAP, or whatever PSAPs are on their network. And the other reason we would send a specific call is if there was testing, a 10-digit dial number for testing, we would send a funny number, a pseudo number out to the ESInet that they would point it to the direct PSAP we told them to. Or if we have a lot of hospitals, PRIs, abuse centers, etc., that have a number pointed to our selective router that says, please send it to this particular PSAP. So that first leg of the call occurs before it gets to the ESInet, and there's a lot of translations behind the scenes that take place as to what PSAP they want to terminate to, and we will tell the ESInet to terminate it to said PSAP based on the criteria found in the selective router. Does that make sense, or did that confuse all of you?
Well, it made sense to me. I think in a nutshell, it sounds like what's happening is there's something on the back end before it gets to Lumen and Intrado that is causing this. Is that correct?
Correct. And based on the original configuration, each end office wanted or each OSP wanted to terminate to a specific PSAP if there was problems.
Okay.
So that configuration is still in play because they don't have a direct route to the ESInet. If in some time Colorado goes the OSP migration, all this will change.
Okay. So that would be the solution for that, to go to that migration.
Correct.
Okay.
Any
questions? Sorry, go ahead. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could speak to the logistics of that migration. What would be required?
It requires a whole network design. Well, first the state has to approve of it, and the best bet would be to talk to the 911 service managers for that area. Cindy Berry, is she on here? She may even know the logistics of how to get it all in play if Cindy Berry's on here.
She is
know.
not.
Okay.
But we
I
can
know,
work with her.
Yeah, there's behind the scenes stuff that goes between the states and the PSAPs and the company that I am not involved in. They tell me there's a project in play. We're going to go OSP migrations, and every end office, even wireless, CLEX, VoIPs, they have to build a whole network of new trunk groups to the ESInet.
So it sounds like something that we can't necessarily, I mean, we can ask for, but we can't drive it because we've got to get buy-in from the OSPs.
Well, I don't know how they've done it in the past. That's why I was hoping Cindy was on here, because it all happens before it comes to my table.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Susan.
Anytime. Anybody
And
else have a question?
Yeah, Susan, Mandy put in a question in the chat. She said, are there any FCC regulations that will push the OSPs to make the move?
That once again is before it hits my table, and that would Cindy or Steve Deloach may be able to answer those questions. They are Steve, I think, heads the Next Gen 911 project, or is their manager.
Okay.
So this is Daryl. I'm a little hesitant to say this, but I think one way to look at this with the FCC, because there aren't specific requirements from the FCC, but one requirement they do have is that all 911 calls have to be delivered. OSPs have an obligation to make sure the 911 call gets delivered into the 911 network for the PSAP that it needs to go to. And so if the 911 system service provider, which in this case is CenturyLink, says this is how 911 calls have to be delivered to us in order to get them to the PSAP, then that FCC rule means that the OSP has to find a way to make that happen. So, that's kind of a hardball approach to it, but I think, with that being the only leverage in some cases we might have, it's something we might want to consider.
Thank you, Daryl. Kim, go ahead. You raised your hand.
Thanks, Kathy. So just from a big picture perspective, we obviously received several missed routes within the state and out of state. And it's incredibly confusing just based on when we deployed the ESInet, how we were discussing and how we thought that the default routing was going to occur. So that's where a lot of the issues start to surface when we're told that the default routing, the last PSAP in the line is Denver, the Western Slope, those PSAPs local to where these selected routers live. And then when they are being delivered to a local PSAP, kind of like they were in the legacy network, it does become confusing. So I just really appreciate Lumen and Intrado taking the time to rethink and look at all of the issues to make sure that we understand what's going on. For our perspective, for the 911 perspective, when a misroute comes in, entering it on the net for that carrier visibility. So Intrado can work with that carrier is great, but they will close it out. And they being Intrado will close it out after that 6 months. So regardless if the carrier resolves the issue or not, they'll attempt that reach out, hey, this needs to be changed in your network. So in that period of time, you may continue to have the misroutes. The other issue is we did ask for carrier contact. So as the issue was presented on the net and Intrado is working it, if we can kind of go around and also start hitting the carrier to push the issue and to try and get these resolved so we're not getting calls delivered to us. And I believe, Kim, your reply back was that you don't have a list for us. So I know Jennifer asked for it, and for her situation on the Western Slope with T-Mobile, some of us have some different contacts, but overall Intrado doesn't have a list of carrier contacts that specifically deal with routing issues. Is that correct?
Kimberly, you're right. That's what Kim Haig had said. The analysts make notes in 911 Net as they're reaching out. I think oftentimes it's to an email mailbox, and it's probably a distribution email box. So the email information is there. If they do speak to a direct person, it's put in there, but it's all based on who the analyst reaches out to. It was my understanding too, Intrado does not have like a list of, okay, Verizon Wireless, this is who you go to, and Sprint, this is who you go to. That's what we understood as well.
Thanks, Tracy. So I just think for this group, our legacy processes of when these come in, of putting them on the net and really trying to work within that Intrado framework of entering it and having them reach out to the carrier. But then if we're able to, or we have a centralized database perhaps of these carrier contacts, then we can reach out and push from our end because we need to get it resolved.
Yep.
Thank you, Kimberly. Joe, you have your hand up?
Yeah, if Intrado is submitting to the carriers that there's a problem with their routing, and the carrier isn't responding, and it goes 6 months, or a period of time that's not corrected, that would be a proper purpose for filing an informal complaint with the FCC. And I'm pretty sure that would get action. The FCC's been handing out pretty big fines for outages and things, and hasn't had a lot of tolerance with that sort of issue.
All right, thank you, Joe, for that information. Any other questions?
Not a question, just an example, because Larimer County is like 2 hours from Denver area. So let's pretend I'm in Fort Collins and I dial 911, and for some reason my ANI does not come across. I hit the Denver selective router, and the selective router says, "Oh, I want it really to terminate to Larimer County because I'm closer to Larimer versus Aurora." So our TDM network was always set up, we would send it to the closest PSAP to Fort Collins. I don't know if that will help any at all. Rather than the ESInet goes in and they default it to Aurora, Aurora has to transfer it back to Larimer. We try to cut it off it was always set up to cut it off at the first leg of the call to get it to the closest PSAP to the originating caller.
Kimberly, go ahead.
Susan, I think that's great information. And I think the piece that's been missing for us in this group, just specifically me on the routing, is that carrier delivery piece, because when we have worked with Lumen about how the upgrade of the network and how the default routing is going to happen when we moved over to the ESInet, that carrier piece of where the carrier is going to enter into the network and deliver the calls really was never part of the bigger picture conversation. So when we anticipated the changes in the network migration, that piece of where the carrier can deliver it to closest PSAP is fantastic, right? That's exactly what we want. Our understanding when the network was deployed was different because of the way that the ESInet is looking for the delivery and the default routing, et cetera. So again, good information for us to know and add in, and this diagram is very helpful.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else have questions or comments?
This is Daryl, not on the routing issue, but before we leave the ESInet issues item, I think there may be a couple other things. Jennifer's on the line. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to talk about the abandoned call issue that you've been experiencing. I know you're just starting to investigate that now.
Sure, I can talk about that, although I do want to preface by saying this is very exploratory so far, and so we may have an issue and we may not. But what I have been investigating is we seem to have a lot of abandoned calls here at Grand Junction on a daily basis. So I've been looking a little bit deeper into those abandoned calls, and on 3 different days within the last month, we've had a situation where a wireless caller has called into the comm center. They can hear us, but we can't hear them. So they hang up and they try again, and the same thing happens. And on at least 2 of these occasions, there has been an actual emergency, but their voice is not getting through to the comm center. And when we call back, obviously they're trying to call us, and so we miss each other and leave messages, et cetera, et cetera. So far, this has happened with 2 different wireless carriers. And as I said, I'm still in the middle of doing research to figure out how widespread this problem is and do we have an issue. But I still think it's something to look at, because, people have an expectation to get a hold of 911. And if they can't get a hold of 911, they think it's their phone, but because this is happening more than once and on like an isolated occasions, I just kind of wonder what's going on with the network. And because it's happening across wireless carriers, it makes me look at the network first more than it does an individual carrier. So I see Mandy's questions. I've been researching this by going through our abandoned calls and noticing when we get multiple calls from the same number, and then checking it against our CAD records, because we do log all of our abandoned 911 calls into CAD and then call them back according to our policies. So it's a little bit tedious. I would ask that if you are an ECATS customer already, this came to my attention because I started getting the day in review report that ECATS has. And it will tell you on a daily basis how many abandoned calls you get. And I got curious. I'm like, why do we have so many abandoned calls? So that's how that came to my attention in the first place. So I intend to do some more research on it today and tomorrow. And Mandy, I'm happy to talk with you offline about it as well. I've been using ECATS to show us our abandoned calls and then going from there with that research. If you're an ECATS customer now, would you please reach out to me or throw your name in the chat so I can reach out to you and see if you're having the same issue as well.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you said Grand Junction, correct?
Yeah.
And where is Mandy? I'll have our side look at what we can see.
Mandy's in Wisco and Montrose.
Okay.
Sorry, Mandy, I know you don't have audio.
Hi, this is Karina with Delta. Jennifer, to your thing on abandoned calls. So we had a similar issue last year. And what I found out, the way it was showing, it was Verizon Wireless, but it had a landline phone number attached to it. And when I talked to the RP further later on, when I was able to get a hold of them, they said that they had a Verizon internet box that was connected to the number because they could hear us, but we couldn't hear them. So I don't know if that could help out in any way.
Yeah, I talked to one person who had this. He was actually calling for himself. He was having trouble breathing, so I'm glad he got through. He spent a week in the hospital before I could talk to him. But he said from his end, and he was older, he said, my phone was messing up. I couldn't get through to you. I had to reboot my phone and then it went through. But that's one guy. And again, this has happened 3 times in the last month. The other one, a lady was trying to report her mom who had passed away and she couldn't get through either. And so I haven't talked to her specifically yet to find out what was happening on her end, but it came to our attention because when she did finally get through, she said, I've been trying to get a hold of you guys for 30 minutes. And we were like, what are you talking about? It's 2 a.m. So, but that's helpful to know, Karina.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions, comments on that?
And then there was one other issue that I've been made aware of recently. I don't see Joel from Adams County on the line, but he let me know recently about apparently there's a extra SIP session assigned to Adams County. And I know he's been working with Andrew to identify where that came from. And apparently it was requested by Adams County's CPE vendor. But I just wanted to bring that up so that if other people may be affected by something similar, that we can help track that down. And Andrew, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Not a whole lot. I emailed Joel a little bit ago, and yeah, we're working. Our whole team is directly working with Intrado just to get that answer and to be able to share it and get all the complete info as soon as possible, because it's pretty serious, and we just want to make sure that it doesn't show up anywhere else. We haven't had any indication of that, but I hope to close the loop with Joel today, and you're on that email string, but I'll share everything when I get it.
All right. Thank you. Ronnie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I was on the phone a little short on the draw there. I was actually just going to touch a little bit with Jennifer in the abandoned 911s. We had an issue 2 months ago with carrier. I think it's called, I think you pronounce it like OMA. It's OOMA. It's an internet-based provider, and anybody that was on OMA was trying to call, and it would just ring, ring, ring on 911. It never went anywhere. It would just ring. So I did a bunch of research. We kind of did a post on Facebook, making sure that if you had that service to call and check. Took it, escalated it up with OMA, and they couldn't figure out what was happening either. I'm still waiting to find out what they did 100% find what the problem was, but there was at least 2 customers that 1 week for us that tried to call 911 that would just ring and ring and ring, and they had true emergencies. They ended up just picking up their cell phone and calling our local police department line because they thought, of course, it was our fault. And not, the service. And it was the internet provider, which we use is Cimarron. So I started with them and then we escalated from there.
That's helpful to know. UMA is a voice over IP solution. We have them in our house phone. So I don't know if all of that is interconnected or not, but I think it's worth looking into. So I appreciate that information as well.
All right, thank you, everybody. Daryl, do you have anything else?
No, thankfully, I think that's enough.
Okay, we'll move on to C, the quarterly QoS statistics.
Oh, Sue.
Hi, do you guys have any other questions for me? If not, I have another call to run to.
Any other questions for Susan?
I might have a question for Sue, and Sue, this is not you, then feel free to jump off, but I would like to revisit again the question of whether or not we can divide our SIP sessions and send partial to one center and partial to another in the event of a rollover situation. You might not have that answer right now, but when we looked at contingent routing last year, Lumen said that we didn't have that capability. I'd like to know if that's still the case, because the information we got at the time sounds like other states are doing that. And the reason that I'm asking is because we have a planned outage that we have to do upcoming, and we're exploring our options for where to route our 911s during that planned outage.
As I work in the old school TDM network, I do not have access to the SIP routing. I don't know, Kim Hegg, are you still on here? Do you have anybody you contact in the SIP network to talk to about that?
And it doesn't have to be on this call. I can reach out to Tracy afterward.
Yeah, we can pull Cindy in and Entrado. I think we'll get all the right people on.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm old school. Sorry, I'm like the really old, almost end carrier days. Oh, so
thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
I'll get back to you. Yeah.
If you have any more questions, just go through who you've been talking to, and they can hit me up.
Thank you, Sue.
Bye, everybody.
All right. So we finally got back to your performance metrics that somehow got missed. Thank you guys again for bringing it to our attention. These are going to be discussed monthly now. And as I understand, you guys have a centralized place that you're going to store them on. So basically the first one, this is just our active probe testing. We ping every 7 minutes to every PSAP just to see how the network availability is performing for 911. Basically anything on this, where we're seeing all of them above the 30 is great. That's what we're looking for. Once in a while, I know not on this one, but if we do get a particular SIP response, I know it was on the one for last month. We had a different color in there of orange, and it just said 481. That would be a SIP response, a Lumen SIP response, meaning that something outside of the network was an error. The null means it didn't reach the particular node on the other end, which is why we circle back to every 7 minutes pinging every PSAP. You're always busy, but we feel that by doing this every 7 minutes, we're going to reach each PSAP within the network. So everything tariff wise and network wise for that particular graph is what we would expect to see. Next one, we get into the mean opinion score. Basically, this is ranking your call quality. I talked a little bit with our networking team. We have a couple people who monitor this every day, all day. They shared their mailbox with me and they get thousands of hits because every time there's a successful SIP response, they get an email. This basically covers packet loss, jitter, latency, bandwidth, everything within the tariff. We want to see the higher, the better. So anything, obviously a 1 would be poor, 5 is excellent. They do investigate anything that hits a 3.5 or lower. And as you can see on this particular graph for January, we didn't have anything that hit that 3.5 or lower threshold. The 3.5 is also the trigger for the MOS by ECMC route. This is basically our Longmont Miami split. Again, 1 would be bad. We hope to never see a 1. 5 is excellent. And we're at about maybe 4.3, kind of hard to tell on this graph. But again, anything that's a 3.5 or lower is going to trigger some investigation on our side and an incident within our portal. The other two, I don't think we had any questions on last time, just packet loss. The tariff is asking for 0.5% less than or equal to, so we are not hitting that for the month of January. And then jitter as well. I know the tariff calls out milliseconds and we do microseconds just because if we did anything smaller than that, the graph wouldn't have any check marks on it to show up in our system. So again, everything here is looking, great as compared to what we expect to see.
So just to clarify, this would have to get to 20,000 instead of 250, which is the top of the graph, in order to be out of compliance with the tariff.
Right. Let me just jump in. So that is what I have for January. I did confirm with the team on our side. We're absolutely fine with providing this to you monthly. I think the agreement was quarterly, but we can do whatever works best for you. It's not a problem to pull it monthly.
That'd be great, Tracy. I'd like to continue with monthly.
I almost agree just because, that's what I shared with the team. If there's a problem, we'd rather know it now instead of, oh yeah, back in March, this happened. So I think monthly works well.
Okay, anything else on that?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, I think we're, go ahead, Daryl.
At the last meeting, there was some discussion about maybe coming up with some examples of calls. And you wouldn't be able to come up with examples of 911 calls from the system if you don't have any that are violating these standards, but maybe some examples of calls from other environments that do go outside of these ranges so that people can understand what it sounds like if there's a problem with jitter, for example, or if the MOS quality is below 4 points or whatever the issue is, so that people understand what these numbers mean in terms of real life examples. I don't know if you've had any success with that yet.
I did ask, I worked with Ken on our side, and I did ask him for examples. He was in full agreement with you. There aren't any within our NOC or within our network, but he was going to attempt to go out on the internet and see if he could find something that could be relevant. I just met with him probably last week, and he hadn't sent anything back to me, but let me follow up. I would think just like a Google search, you might be able to find something.
Okay, and I'll just leave this on the agenda for future meetings if Kathy agrees.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Thanks, Daryl. Okay, we'll move on to old business. I do not see that Tim is on the call. I don't know if anybody else would have information on this. I know Tim is leading some other meetings, so it's probably better to hear from him as opposed to anybody else on this right now. Tracy or anyone else from Lumen, any comment on that?
I don't. I'm on Tim's calls, but he has the most pertinent information.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought. Then we'll move on to B with Daryl for Lumen Knock update on responsiveness.
Yeah, let me pull up my log real quick. So I did get one report this period. Shauna Clementi contacted me on the, well, it was actually near the end of January. I didn't get it onto the spreadsheet until February 1st, but there was a localized outage in Pueblo County, but the outage notification went to Pueblo PD instead of Pueblo County, which actually dispatches for that area. Shauna reported that when she called the NOC to let them know that this was actually in their service area, she had to wait on hold for 30 minutes. I did forward this information on to Carl Klein with the Lumen NOC to let him know, and he did see that there were delays that day. Is Carl on? I don't know if Carl's on the call. Doesn't look like he is, but he did acknowledge that there were problems that day and that he would be taking some actions to help alleviate that. But I did want to let everybody know that there was another report.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, if anybody else has problems with the NOC, as far as not being responsive or having to hold on the line for too long, forward those on to me because I'm making sure that the NOC supervisor is aware of them.
All right, thank you, Darren. The next item is the settlement agreement requirement regarding CenturyLink and the West contract. I know Tim is working on that. And I can't remember, Tracy, I think it was you that said that he was working on that and would have that to us. Is that correct?
It is. I reached out to him last week and he said that it's still getting approval to be sent. So I don't have the document, but he does know that he has that as an action.
Okay. I'm probably going to reach out to him because this is the 4th month since we started asking for this. So we'd like to see that.
Okay.
And this is Daryl. I mean, the provision of this to the ESInet users group was something that was agreed to by CenturyLink in a settlement that was already approved by the commission back in 2018, I think. So I understand that it may be necessary to go through additional legal authorizations inside CenturyLink, but I apologize that I'm not delivering this to probably the person who needs to hear it right now, but that needs to be relayed to the legal team that this is already an obligation that CenturyLink has undertaken.
No, I completely understand, Daryl.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Is Rich Johnston on?
Rich had noted, I think he wasn't going to be on the call, but Daryl, I think you were copied on it. He gave us a bunch of information.
Yes, and I actually put it in the folder for today. So we had asked Rich if there was any way to find out if there had been an increase in non-service initialized calls in Colorado, and he just sent this to me this morning, but it's really great information. Breaks it down by year, going back to the beginning of breaks down by month, I should say, going back to the beginning of 2022. And you can see on the right-hand column are the percentages of calls that were basically NSI calls based on the fact that they have an NPA showing a 911 as the area code, which is one of the things that happens with a non-initialized call, non-service initialized call. And it looks fairly consistent. In January, there was a spike, but Rich said that for the first few days of February, the percentage seems to be back down in the under 7% range. So that one spike in January over 7% might have been an anomaly, but for every other month, it was fairly consistent in the 6 to 7% range. And then back in early 2022, there were a couple of months where it was below 6%. So it might be increasing slowly, but I'm not seeing any huge spikes. But it might be something that we want to track going forward, and given the fact that at least one other state, Kentucky, is reporting seeing huge spikes in this area that they think are due to the retirement of the 3G cell networks. Tracy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, Rich took it and ran with it and had excellent information.
All right, thank you, Daryl.
Too many documents, Kathy.
I know. I know. Okay, 911 net training, Tracy.
Yes. So those of you that had worked through Daryl and let us know that you wanted training on 911 net, I provided that spreadsheet to Entrado. And this week, there were several email invites sent out, computer calendar dates set that you guys can hop on. There were a few more of you than expected, so she did decide to kind of group these instead of doing individual sessions. Her intent was to make sure that there was at least one training available each day. She tried to mix up mornings and afternoons. So if any of you requested training and you did not get a calendar invite for the month of March, reach out to me or Daryl. We both have a spreadsheet that we're tracking. But everybody that initially asked for training should have gotten an email invite. It is just one session. She sent out, I think, 6 of them. You only need to attend one. She just was trying to, like I said, make it so that she could fit everyone's schedule. If none of those dates and times work for you, because you're in the PSAP at, a different day or time, or you're on vacation or whatever, you can reach directly out to Entrado and she can schedule a one-off. But for right now, I know she has 6 of those scheduled in March.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions about that? Or if you didn't get an invite and you wanted one, please reach out to Daryl or Tracy and let them know. Okay, next is the parking lot document.
So at the last meeting, there was discussion of, we had a number of items that had been on the agenda for a very long time, and there was discussion about whether they needed to stay on the agenda. And we talked about moving some of them to a parking lot document where we could keep track of long-term items without them necessarily being on every agenda. So I created that. This link in the agenda will take you to it. And my suggestion is that we just leave parking lot document on the old business and then ask if there's anything from that document that anybody wants to pull off and discuss. So otherwise we don't have to go through every item that's on here every time, but it'll be there so that we don't forget about them. So right now what's on there is addition of text and 911 service to the ESInet tariff, inclusion of transitional data management system, TDMS, and geospatial routing into the ESInet tariff, and Lumen ESInet participation in the NG911 Interoperability Oversight Commission and NIOC credentialing. If anybody has anything else that they would like added to this, let me know. Otherwise, we just kind of use it as a teaser every meeting to say, is there anything on here that needs to be pulled off and discussed today?
I don't see anything there.
Great. So Kathy, does that sound like a good way to go forward with that, using that document so that we can take some of those off of our plate at every meeting?
Yes, I like that idea. That keeps it so that we see it and it doesn't get dropped off because we don't see it every month. That's a good idea.
Good.
Okay. Next is new business. Does anybody have any new business that they'd like to bring forward? Okay, I don't see anything. Next would be open discussion, questions, concerns from PSAPs to Lumen. We don't see anything. And then open issues from Lumen to PSAPs that need immediate action or follow-up.
I don't have anything other than if anyone still wants to get on that training like you talked about.
Okay, thanks. All right, public comment. Non-voting members are welcome to provide comments during this portion of the meeting. Okay, and then I'll just say anything else for the good of the order. All right, everybody, it looks like we are done for today. I will call this meeting adjourned at 10:51. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all.